You're listening to the Westminster-Canterbury Tales podcast, creating community to foster joy and well-being. Thanks for listening.
Well, welcome to a new episode of Tell Me a Story at Westminster-Canterbury on Chesapeake Bay. And today we're delighted to have Ardell McCoy. Ardell, welcome.
Thank you.
Well, let's begin just by telling us a little bit about your family and your history of your family, where you were born,
Okay.
When you went to school, that sort of thing. Just give us a little synopsis, certainly of the early part of your life.
Okay, I'm a New Yorker, born in the Bronx.
I can hear it now, now that you said that.
I have one sister, and I stayed in the Bronx until I was 18. Our mother died when we were young, so we were raised by my father. And my sister moved to California, so when I graduated from Central Commercial High School, and that was a little high school located on 42nd Street on the east side between Horn and Hardart and the Daily News building.
Okay.
So we were all right in the center of downtown. But I went to California following my sister. She, in turn, and her husband moved away. They went back to New York. I stayed. So while in California, I had graduated from high school, got a job at Santa Monica Unified School District, and I stayed within that system for 39 years.
Wow.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
I worked my way up to Director of Purchasing.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there, early on, I did get married. I think it was in 66.
Mm-hmm.
Had one child and divorced in 70.
Okay.
One child and one son. And it was amicable. My ex-husband was still in Southern California, so I had custody. He had visitation rights. We didn't split the child down the middle in 50-50. Anyway, so I love life in Santa Monica. It was a beautiful place to raise a child.
It is. It's warm.
Absolutely marvelous. And working for the school district and having my son within the school district, it was kind of like, poor kid, he couldn't get away with nothing. Everybody, you're Ardell's son, So he grew up with a bunch of people with eyes on him, always.
He was a pretty smart kid, too.
He's a smart kid. He was bilingual by the time 4th grade. Because in California, they immerse them in Spanish. So He was bilingual. Started playing violin in 3rd grade and played all the way through 4 years at Stanford.
Wow.
So he's a classical violinist.
Stanford is a very good school.
He won a 4-year scholarship there after going to Santa Monica High School. He's a very bright kid. Electrical engineering undergrad, and then he went to WashU in St. Louis Med School for an MD and a PhD in molecular biology. So this kid was
something we
off
all
the
pick
chart.
up so easily in our spare time.
But when he started Stanford, I started English 100 at the community college where I was working, and went and got an undergrad, and then I got a graduate degree and started teaching there part-time.
Wow.
In the business division.
Yeah.
My son in St. Louis, married, started working for Monsanto for about 6 or 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the 3rd child came along, he realized, I think I need to make more money, because as a scientist, your salary, it's not great. So Monsanto was so impressed with him, they paid for him to go back to med school to do another year to get up to date. And then he did an intern at Boston University Medical Center. And they live in Boston now. He and his wife, 2 children are still at home. Oldest granddaughter graduated from Princeton and is now studying LSATs for law school. Second grandson has a degree in Mandarin Chinese and cybersecurity, and recently starting working for MIT.
Wow.
So I'm hoping that he can get a master's while he's there. That'd be great. And I continued my life in Santa Monica. They're living in Boston. I continued in Santa Monica. In about 2000, I decided it's time to relocate to the East Coast where I had family. And that's what I did. I moved to Virginia because I had a niece that lived here, does live here in Suffolk. She married military while she was going to UVA. So I used to visit And I decided, well, it's affordable. It's not New York, and it's definitely not Boston. It was affordable here. So that's how I wound up getting here to this area.
And it's warm and beautiful here. Let's face
Absolutely.
and you're right on the water now.
And it's got real trees, beautiful trees. That's what I felt. But since I've been here, I became a docent at the Chrysler Museum. I've been doing that for 22 years.
Wow.
Love it. I absolutely love it. I'm on the President's Council for Inclusion and Diversity at the Botanical Garden, and I've been doing that for about 12 or 14 years there. We do celebrate the 225 African American women that doing the WPA program started when the garden was a swamp and started the first azaleas. So we recognize them.
Yeah.
'Cause so many people have no idea how that garden started. They just think it was always there. But you have to remember, even though they started the garden in WPA time in the late 30s, they were not allowed to go into the garden until the 70s. So that's part of how it was.
The legacy of how we've treated a certain group of people is not something to be celebrated.
Right. So, and I enjoy doing that. And as far as hobbies for myself, I tutored over at Oscar Smith High School. I'm good with English and history and not the math. So for about 3 years, I would help out there on Thursdays with students. So that was kind of a fun thing because I lived in Chesapeake.
Yeah. Well, you kept busy.
Yeah. I did. I kept busy. I sure did. The Chrysler keeps you busy. And I got the opportunity to do a lot of travel. I did. Once my son went away to college, then I was free. And so I got out and got to see a lot of the world.
Name some of the places you've been. Where have you enjoyed going and had adventures in?
My first trip was to Turkey alone. And that
Oh,
was
my.
interesting. Yeah, I found that interesting.
Yeah,
and
I've been to Turkey twice. I love it.
did
Istanbul,
too.
yeah. Or
Yes.
Constantinople, which is it? But at any rate.
And then my second trip, I went with the college that I worked for, Santa Monica Community College. We went on a student trip, and I got to go along, and that was wonderful. That was in '95 or so. To China. I'm sorry,
China.
to China.
Okay.
We were gone for about 3 weeks.
Beijing or somewhere else?
We started out with, I think it was Suzhou, Hangzhou, Beijing.
Oh, wow.
Shanghai, of course.
Oh, wow.
So
You've got a great experience. So it wasn't just one city.
It was educational, too,
Yeah.
because we had instructors that would come down and talk to our group.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
we were all from Santa Monica, so it was like
Yeah.
a family affair. And we were there for 4th of July, and I remember our hotel gave us a cake with the flag on it, which was very nice. And this was '95, so this was good. This was good.
I celebrated the 4th of July once in England.
Did you?
And they said it was a barbecue. I thought maybe they were going to barbecue us, It didn't go so well for them. But they were kind. It was a very nice time we had. But go ahead.
Well, while my son was in med school, he converted to Orthodox Judaism. So I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? But he was raised open at the top, so he was free to make choices. 30 years later, he's still practicing as an Orthodox Jew. So naturally, I head out to Israel. I got to say, what's going on here? Being raised in New York, you're around Jewish people, you're around, my teachers in elementary school, middle school, and high school were Jewish. So it was always a familiarity. But as far as the religion to the core, I went to Israel, but I also took a class at the American Jewish University in Los Angeles up on Mulholland Drive to get a clear understanding of the religion. And I found that very interesting. And I guess I got a better understanding of what he was embracing.
Sure.
It resonates for him well. And so that's his life. I got a cruise to Russia. I did the Volga River from Moscow up to St. Petersburg. I happened to be visiting in L.A., and I got a card from Grand Central Tours, GCT, and they were going to do this cruise. And I called, and they had an opening for single. They were going to play the visa and half the airfare, so I jumped on it. And I thought that was kind of an interesting trip, too.
Yeah, So you've been to some very unusual places, Russia, Israel, Turkey. That's great.
Central America to Teotihuacan to the Maya. I followed the route of the Maya, and that was very interesting. The best trip was to the stands, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan,
Wow.
and just wonderful.
Eastern Europe. Mhm.
Exactly, and the food was not chemical treated. It was like, this is a real tomato, It was so interesting to see, and I got that trip based on a book that I read called The Silk Road.
Okay.
And it was just fascinating, the book, and I got curious about it, so I started researching, and I wound up going, and it was like 2.5, 3 weeks. Only 14 of us in the group, so it was small.
Oh, wow. That's very nice to have a size group.
It was.
And the Silk Road, what was that?
That's the Silk Road from China to things moving to Europe.
Europe, And silk was what
the silk,
commerce
the spices.
of what they needed.
I mean, it was back and forth. It was wonderful. And then the math that started there, and the temples that were built, the mosques that were built, that were old, absolutely beautiful, really beautiful. And it wasn't crowded with a lot of people. It was just kind of, it was still kind of, this was about 7-8 years ago, so it wasn't a lot of people there. It was
Right. So that was fairly recent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Good for you.
My last trip was to Belgium and to Holland, because I wanted to see the Vermeer art show.
Sure.
And I got there to the Rijksmuseum in Holland 2 days before that show closed, and I didn't have a ticket, but I knew the universe was going to provide it. And a woman said, I have an extra ticket for the Vermeer show. Would you like it? And I said, yes. So
you got to see it.
I got to see it.
Oh, that's great.
And then I came back and packed up and moved into Westminster.
Oh, what a good move. That was a great time for you. So when you were in Belgium, you went to Brussels, of course. Isn't that beautiful, particularly the center at night with all the different lights and things on the building? I don't know if you got to go out at night much, but
we did. I did a bit. One of the things I noticed is that they had these beautiful churches, and I usually like to visit churches. I like to go in, sit, and just be still and feel the energy. Like in Turkey, you can do it, Hagia Sophia, things like that.
Yeah.
However, all of their beautiful fronts, they now have stores inside.
That's right.
Things that changed.
Yeah, the church has dwarfed in number, and so they've had to find other ways to keep up the buildings. I wrote a piece once on my trip to Tanzania and the churches in England and in Tanzania, and of course the churches in England are magnificent and beautiful. The churches in Tanzania are small and tin roofs, if they have anything besides a straw roof or something like that. But the people know how to worship in Tanzania. But it's a cultural event in Europe more often than true worship. But interesting. Yeah.
When you mentioned Tanzania, I went on a safari, Kenya, Tanzania.
Oh, okay, great.
I had done that a couple of years ago.
Well, you can't talk to me without telling me that, because I've been to Tanzania 20 times.
I know. I'm waiting to meet your friend that comes in.
Good. He'll be here in August.
It was interesting to see a country, and I also went to West Africa, and there's not a lot of trips out of the local tour travel agencies that go to West Africa. It's all French. So I found a trip that was going out of Canada, and I went with that group. It was another small group, and we did Mali, Benin, Burkina Faso.
Cote d'Ivoire?
Didn't go to Cote d'Ivoire.
Okay.
We went to Senegal.
Okay.
And
wow, you went to a lot of great
places.
One,
But one of the things that I recognize in Mali, we were in 5 white Jeeps.
Yeah.
So we were traveling along like you see in a movie or
Sure.
so. We were leaving a little village in Mali. And I turned around and I saw, there you might have 1 or 2 men, and they have a couple of wives and lots of children.
Sure.
I saw this child standing, about 3-year-old or 3-year-old, is standing watching as we were leaving. And I looked back and I realized that child has more history with the griots, the people that talk about who your mother, your grandmother, your great-grandmother was. I can't go back past my mother and my father.
That's right. Yeah.
Because of my father was born in Selma, Alabama. My mother was born in Jacksonville. My father's 1898. My mother was 1908. With her passing, I didn't get a lot of history. I tried to research, can only go to names of her family. So I don't have the history that Molly Baby
Sure.
had.
Yeah, which is
I felt it very strongly, too.
Fascinating understanding. Talk to me a little bit about your mother and your mother's family. How old were you first when you were 5? So do you have recollections of your mother?
None.
None.
She worked.
She worked.
I was with babysitter. Mrs. Henderson, I know, was my babysitter.
Yeah.
But no,
yeah.
not
Well, tell
not
us
her.
about that time. Did your mother have family that you...
She had some sisters in New York, but I guess they were not close with my father.
Okay.
And my father probably, felt like, well, they were living in, we were in the Bronx. Now, the Bronx was uptown. They lived in Harlem.
Okay. So that was...
So that was a bit of a difference.
Yeah.
And I couldn't go down and visit on my own. My father was working. My father would hire people to come in and take care of the house, comb our hair, make sure our clothing for school, things like that.
What did your father do?
He worked my father had a 3rd grade education, but he worked in a iron fabricating company.
Oh, wow.
But here's something about my father. He was very fair-skinned. He had silky hair and Paul Newman blue eyes.
Oh, my.
I don't know if he passed. I don't know, how, but he managed to we had a very wonderful life as far as things.
Right.
But
he was able to provide,
a
a good provider. Yeah.
He was a good provider, but he didn't know the emotional needs for young women.
Sure.
You know?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of men don't.
No, and he didn't at that time. So consequently, I felt somewhere about 8 or 9, felt like I need somebody here permanently. So I know a woman that had a restaurant, and she had her niece was there. And I went down with my smart self and said, "Are you married?" And she says, "No." I said, "Well, you need to meet my father.
Oh, my.
Because I need somebody to take care of me."
You really said that?
I did.
And you were that blunt and that straightforward.
I knew I had a need.
Yeah.
I needed somebody because, my father and a lady coming in and she doesn't stay. So her name was Lucy, and I called her Miss Lucy. I never called her mother, but she stayed around until I was in my early teens.
So her father and you...
They did marry.
Oh, they did marry.
Yeah,
they got
did
together.
marry. I guess he felt like he needed somebody too.
Yeah.
Whatever that arrangement was, it worked for me for a while.
But you were the one. You were the one that made it happen. Oh, what a wonderful story that is.
I instigated that because I was tired of, maybe this lady will show up on time to get me ready for school or not. So I had to take it action.
And this is when you were 9.
I was about 8 or 9.
8 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
So you were a very precocious young lady.
I guess so. But I don't know what they had needs too. She had a need. She was from Ozark, Alabama.
Okay.
And my father, and maybe they felt like, well, okay, he can provide her with a home. She can in turn take care of things.
There's some mutual.
She was a pretty good lady because. And I submitted her name for Queen for a Day, which was a program that used to be on
I
TV.
remember.
Do you remember Queen?
Of course I do. Yeah.
She won.
Oh my goodness.
She won.
She was on the program.
She was on the
and
program.
She
She had a long ball gown on. She won.
Oh my goodness.
I wrote the story and sent it in.
Oh, how old were you?
10, somewhere in there.
Oh my goodness.
Because she Miss Lucy could cook.
Yeah.
She wasn't mother. I just couldn't bring myself to say mom,
yeah.
but I called her Miss Lucy. She had no children of her own.
Did they stay married?
Until I about 15 or 16.
Yeah.
It didn't last. Yeah. But
after that,
my father might have been a tough character to live with. I mean, he was a handsome guy. He was, and there was always flirtation going on out there somewhere.
Yeah.
And I guess people say, "Enough, Mr. Lee."
Yeah.
Everybody called him Mr. Lee. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, she won, and she was just so delighted.
That is a wonderful story. Oh, my.
I think I gave her a gift because she never had any of her own natural children.
Yeah.
So
Have you kept up with her?
She passed away years ago, but she went back to the South, and I was in Southern California.
That's a big difference.
My sister in New York kept in touch because, my life was unfolding 3,000 miles away. And don't forget, I was 39 years out there away from all of my family.
That's right. Uh-huh. So your sister was older. How much older?
6 years.
And somehow she ended up out in California?
She came, her husband, he went out, and they stayed for a while, and then he had a became schizophrenic.
Oh, my.
So he wanted to go home, and she was a housesprout. She had 2 children, so they moved back to New York to my father. His mother was there, their family,
that
evidently.
helps.
And then he wound up going in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, in New York, you cannot divorce at that time, and that must have been like 70, 71. It had to be mental challenges. So she was able to divorce, but she raised her 2 kids, and we don't know what happened to him because he got out. He was in a state hospital in New York
For several years, or?
I don't think it was that long because he
but for
was
a while.
very clever. He got out. He was in the Korean War. He was,
So maybe some PTSD
some
kind of.
whatever. Yes, could have been.
Yeah.
But he got out. But they were divorced, and he meandered because I remember one day he showed up at my house in Santa Monica.
Oh, my.
And I kind of felt like I knew he wasn't the person I knew. I knew him from the time I knew I existed. He used to come on his Schwinn bike and take me to the Tip Top Hill and ride me down, and I was in 7th heaven. So these were people we grew up with.
Yeah.
She married a childhood friend. But when he was not able to provide or be responsible, she had to let it go.
Well, of course. What about your father's family?
Don't know.
You don't know?
Never heard anything about
Never heard
him.
anything. So he was by himself.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
1898, don't forget.
And it's amazing that he did so well.
That's right.
Without some kind of familiar support.
I have no clue.
And you still don't to this day.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. As a matter of fact, I asked him one time, tell me something about my mother. And he said, Ardell, you are your mother. And that was the end of it. And I knew not to probe, you know.
And what was it your mother died of?
Stroke.
1949.
Wow.
1949. Wow. Yeah.
And at that time, of course,
they didn't have
all of
the resources
things,
they have today.
She had lived, she would have been, they did say if she had lived, she would have been a vegetable.
Yeah, so in a way it's a blessing. So you went to high school in
New York,
Central
Commercial
City.
High School.
How did New York, what lasting influences does it?
Museums. I played violin in junior high school.
Oh, so your son comes by it honestly.
We had music in junior high school, so I picked a violin. Now my father never bought me a violin or gave me private lessons, but for the 3 years that I was at PS 40, we were numbered schools then.
Okay.
I played violin, and I played first violin, second stand, which is not too bad.
No. How did you practice if you didn't have a violin?
I school violin. You could take it home.
You could take it home.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then in the summertime, when my father was very strict, had curfews, but time to be in the house. So I sit on the fire escape playing Fiddler on the Roof.
Oh my God.
I sat on the fire escape.
Oh,
Nobody
that's
wanted
funny.
to hear me playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and all of that in the house. Go sit on the fire escape.
So you did that.
I did that, but I went last Saturday to hear Scheherazade with Jacobson over at the Sandler with the Virginia Symphony.
Sure.
When I was, the 3 years that I played violin in junior high school, the first album I ever bought, I was 14, and it was Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade.
Wow.
And last Saturday was the first time I heard it live.
Oh.
I was in 7th heaven.
You liked it.
I loved it.
You loved it.
I loved it because I usher over there. I usher all over the city.
No, I know you do. Yeah. Oh, that's so wonderful that you could experience that so many years later. Yeah.
Yes, it's a long time later. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. But it resonates with you because your first album was that, and you must have heard it before then.
Always
to be your first album. Yeah.
I listened to the classical station here, but in New York, growing up in school, they exposed us to dress rehearsals for opera, dress rehearsals for plays. the museums. So all of that was embedded when I was just going along. And
So
that's why
you're-
I'm involved in it today.
So you're volunteering at museums. You're giving back what was given to you.
And my
Yeah.
son, I drug him everywhere. And, you know, I didn't know how it took, but my granddaughter, she's 27, she lives in D.C., the one that's studying for the LSTAT.
Right.
She said, my father said, we have to go to a ballet. He had to go to a ballet when he was growing up. You've got to be exposed. I said, hallelujah, it took.
yeah. Well, they say about kids, it's more caught than taught.
Yes, yes.
And I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you like best about living in California?
I like that. What I liked about California is you could get up every morning and reinvent yourself. There was no track you got caught in. If you wanted to do something else, you just did it. There were no limitations. There was a freedom there.
Well, Santa Monica is one of the nicer areas in
know.
California. I mean, you lived in
I lived in a very
probably
nice-
very expensive area too.
You know, at the time, though, in the 60s, it wasn't that bad. So
That's
don't
right,
forget.
yeah.
It wasn't that bad. And once you're in, you stayed because they had rent control,
You
you know. So I had a two-bedroom apartment I lived in for 25 years.
Oh my goodness.
And then my son went away, and I invested in investment property, which gave me enough to buy a condo in Santa Monica. You know how you have to play that game.
Yeah, I understand.
But I mean, I used to, when I got out of work, I went down to Santa Monica Pier, parked my car, and walked to Venice Beach. And that was like walking through the United Nations.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
and
that
all
was
the
my
people on the
walk side.
sand, and all the
Absolutely.
people.
And the languages and
Yeah.
the people, because that was the place to go, Venice Beach. you
Oh
know.
yeah, everybody knows.
And then
Venice
one
Beach.
day, one day, it gentrified. It started gentrifying, and the flavor started leaving.
Yeah. It
But
just
I'm glad I got to know it.
all came probably vanilla
Yeah,
flavor.
It
Yeah.
did. It did.
And so you found a place to live, and you like it here.
Not at first. When visiting my niece 2 or 3 times was fine, and it was affordable. And then I settled in, and
In Chesapeake,
my first place was in Portsmouth.
Portsmouth.
I had never owned a house.
Okay.
So I went and right at Coleman's Nursery is somewhere
Sure.
on Cedar Lake. Well, there was a little road there called Pinecroft, which was a little
Okay.
private custom houses. I went and bought this house in there.
Oh my.
And I said, trees shed leaves. In California, they didn't. I had leaves
Well,
all over the
some
yard.
of them do.
I didn't know about poison ivy. I had a man, he said, you know you got poison
They got poison ivy in California
There was
too.
a snake under the house. I mean, oh my God, my shoes were mildewing that was
Yep,
sitting
yep.
I sold and got the heck. I went back to California 2 times trying to reestablish.
Oh, really?
Yes. I wouldn't be here today if I could have. Prices kept spiraling.
Yeah, that's right.
Couldn't afford to be there anymore.
Yeah. That I totally understand. So then you ended up in Chesapeake for a while.
Ended up in Chesapeake in a 55 and up community.
Okay.
And it was no snakes and no poison ivy, and I didn't have to do anything outside. My whole thing was taking care of the inside.
I don't know how they can get rid of the snakes. I know they have the stuff they spread out. I've been trying to because I have a little grandchild that lives with me now and her parents and a little dog, little Scotty dog. So I'm scared. I found a copperhead a year and a half ago on my deck, which is scary, you know. So
I would be remiss. I didn't mention I have 4 grands. I mentioned the oldest
Right,
two.
right.
The second grandson plays the stock market,
oh my.
and he does well. He has a mentor who's an investment banker.
Okay.
And my son and his wife had to put up X amount of dollars for him to start to be mentored by this gentleman.
Sure.
And he's hoping eventually to be hired to be one of the investors.
Sure.
And then the youngest one is a girl. She's 16, and she's a basketball fanatic. So evidently she's present or in charge of her. I don't know anything about sports, but she's
Yeah.
captain of her team. And somebody from Yale invited her to come down just to see, because when she graduates
Yeah.
out of her Hebrew Academy, she might want to, they were thinking about maybe she could be scholarship into something. And the challenge with Orthodox Jews, Friday to Saturday is Shabbat.
Oh yeah.
Can't play basketball.
Yeah, that's hard.
So that'll be something.
Yeah, women's basketball has really taken off.
Yes, it is.
In the last year or so with this young woman who's
Caitlin.
Caitlin, yeah, she's amazing. She's fun to watch. And good for women's sports. It's
They're
about
making money.
time.
Yes,
They are making money, and they're what comes along with it is they're gaining fans and people watching it. It's exciting, and it's in many ways really wonderful. Oh, that's great. Let's spend a little more time talking about your traveling, because not everybody picks up and goes to Turkey as their first trip. Just how did that come about?
I met a woman that talked about Turkey, and I said, I think I want to go. I didn't know. So Turkey was the first trip, and it was just, first of all, I went over.
Turkey's extreme. I've been there twice, and it's.
I passed through the second time, but the first time it was the trip there, and they drink tea. It's not into all of that coffee, that we think of Turkish coffee. But I found they were tea drinkers. But I just found it was my first trip away. And I thought, wow, that was interesting.
So where did you go in Turkey?
You're asking me to go back to asking me to go way back there. Anatolia, definitely into Istanbul. And
Istanbul,
I was always trying to get to the
Alexandria?
the mosque.
Oh, the mosque.
Well, that was from Egypt, Alexandria. When I was when I went to Egypt.
Yeah. Okay.
And I
You
have
did-
gone
you
to
did that.
Egypt.
Okay,
I did.
good.
I'm done in Egypt twice, I think.
All
Just
right. Good.
because to get to the treasury, you had to go to
So
Egypt.
you were only in the first time. You were only in Turkey, and
We just did Turkey.
and
at
you
that
wanted to
time.
go to the Hagia Sophia.
The Hagia. I did go to Hagia Sophia a couple of times.
Now, what's interesting about that, when I was there, it was a church, and now it went back to being a mosque. I think it was originally a church, then moved to a mosque, then moved to a church, then moved to a mosque, and then it was a neutral place for a while. And now I think it's a mosque again.
Constantinople Constantine first built it, and then so because now it's a mosque, you got the big round disc Arabic signs over the Christian type things. Here's something about me. I've gone to Western Europe, but I've also gone to Eastern Europe and to Auschwitz, places like that. When my son converted to Judaism, my opening for not just cursory, the garment district in New York, but for the religion opened up for me. And taking a class on it, a semester, it really kind of, okay, let me see what's more going on. So going to Auschwitz was one of those things too, and I went in the winter. So it was very
in
few
Germany,
people.
then, you're talking about?
Poland, I thought Auschwitz.
Auschwitz?
No, because I was in Berlin first, and then I took a train into Poland.
Okay, maybe it was. I thought it was Germany, but I could
Maybe
be
it
wrong.
is.
I've been to Dachau, and that's in Germany, I know, but
yeah.
And not only that,
When I went, I was still using film camera.
Oh,
so
my.
It was film camera. So, because I remember I had to reload, and it was cold. But in Turkey, it was fascinating, and so I was interested in the souks where you're going through, I bought back bars of soap. That was made there, and I bought enough back that I shared it with people because
wonderful.
they make things like that. I was interested in those kind of little curious things. And then, of course, going to the treasury. In Egypt, I noticed that Sharm el-Sheikh there's a place away from Egypt. My tour guide said that an Egyptian woman could not have premarital sex. So there's a place, Sharm el-Sheikh, I think it was. We took a little ferry across this other place. There were all kinds of European women that were there and men that were there to learn, if you will.
Right.
And I thought it was fascinating. Because of the fact that it's right here, but it's for women. It's you had to be pure when you married.
Yeah. Now it's interesting. You went to Auschwitz, but you also went to Israel, and of course they have the museum there
LA has one of the best Holocaust
LA?
museums.
Okay.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
I thought the one when I saw it in Israel. We were in Jerusalem. I thought it was okay, but I thought the one in L.A. was fabulous.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't been to the one in L.A.
Don't forget, there's a lot of Jewish producers, directors, and the
Yeah,
money just
yeah.
flowed. Yeah.
Spielberg and others,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was in the museum in Jerusalem for what happened to the Jews. I was a young man. I wasn't that old, and the thing that really brought it home was that they had brought children in. So I guess all the children had to come in that lived in and went to school in Jerusalem. And one of the children broke down, started crying.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, okay, yeah, now I need to take this seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an interesting time for me. But I haven't been to the one in L.A. I'm going to have to try that.
The one in L.A.
And I think there's one in D.C. now, too.
There's one in D.C.
Yeah.
The one in L.A., you walk in and you pull a card. You have a card of a person, a child.
Yeah.
And you walk around with that card, and at the end you find out whether they survived or not. And boy, was the tears flowing when you find it, the child you have carried through the museum. At the end, you put it in, and they let you know whether they continue to live or were deceased.
So when you're in, you said Holland, Amsterdam, Netherlands, I imagine is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Did you go to Amsterdam? I'm sure.
But I was on a art history tour.
Oh, you were on art history because Anne Frank's house there is that,
I didn't go through it, and you know why? Yeah. First of all, I read about it's narrow. It's a lot of steps in there.
It is. It's not that.
I didn't think it would be.
It's not that big of a deal.
I was more.
I mean, it might be a big deal, but it's not that. It's small, and it for all the importance that it has, it isn't viewing.
Right.
Important is
when I was younger, my father did not allow me to read comic books or True Love magazines in my house. Couldn't do that. No, couldn't bring that in.
Why?
I don't know. I guess he felt like don't forget, he was third grade education, a darn good provider.
Was he religious?
In the Baptist. We were Baptist.
Oh, there you go. Okay, right. Now we know.
So I went to the Boston Road Library and I took out novels and I read everything. And Anne Frank's diary, when I was 8 or 9, I started reading it.
When you were 8 or 9?
Yeah, I started
That's
reading
incredible.
Anne Frank's diary. And so I had a diary named Kitty myself.
How would you... Oh, wow, that's interesting. I'd love to read that diary.
What it did... Well, she left a book with all of her...
I know. I mean, I would love to read your diary.
Oh. And what it did for me, it opened up that world of what happened. So I started reading everything I could about the Holocaust.
How did you come upon Anne Frank's diary?
Probably in school.
Somebody mentioned it or something
Teacher,
like that?
Something. But I couldn't read anything, so I go to the library. And because of the fact that I didn't have a mother at home, library was my home away from home. Yeah. Today, I belong to the Virginia Beach Library, Norfolk, and Chesapeake.
Oh, my. Okay.
I still browse the library.
It's fun, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't want to read a book on internet or on a cell phone. I want to read a book.
Yeah, I understand that. So when you were in Israel, did you go to what places did you visit? Did you visit, I guess what I'm wondering, did you visit Masada?
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, Masada. It's where the Romans, when they conquered the Jews and they held out, it's outside of
I know what you're talking about, up in the mountain area. Yes, we did.
Yeah.
We did that. We went to the place where the crucifixion was supposed to have taken place, where the
right near the truck stop,
rolling away the stone where he was. The body was incorporated for a while.
Yeah, the garden. They call it the garden. And if you look over, you always see the same picture. If you look over the other side, you'll notice that there's a bus station there.
Well, this was 2008 or 2009, so we're going back. Don't forget, I'm a senior here now, so I don't remember everything.
Yeah.
But my curiosity was up. Don't forget, I had a son that I took to the museum in Los Angeles who wept when his kid did not survive from that card. And I think that was the opening for him. And he's a very self-contained unit, so he doesn't express a lot outwardly, but feels a lot very deeply.
Sure.
So when he let me know in med school that he had not met his wife, he converted on his own. And then the Rebbe said, oh, we got to get this future doctor married. And they found a woman in Brooklyn, African-American woman who was an Orthodox Jew in Crown Heights, Brooklyn.
Sure.
They met, and in 90 days, they were getting married, and I was having a heart attack. You're doing what?
But you went.
Oh, definitely. I had to go.
Yeah.
You know, I sat on the women's side of the shul, and my ex-husband came in from Seattle. Yeah. He and his girlfriend he was on the west side. I had to take his girlfriend on my side, you know, because he had, gotten involved again.
I understand.
And we were there to celebrate our son.
Yeah. Well, good. So when you went to Israel, you also went to Jordan.
Yes.
I think Jordan's one of the best kept secrets of the Middle East, because Amman itself is pretty amazing. But then you have the Roman ruins outside. I think it's north, and then south, if I have my directions correct here, is the rock city, Petra.
Okay. Petra is where the treasury and all of that's at.
Right, that is, and that's in Nabateans.
That was a side trip for us. So we didn't go all the way up to Amman. I was in Egypt, and that was like an add-on for us.
So you went from Egypt into that. Okay.
Yeah, we sailed up on the boat.
How fun. I've never been on the boat.
Because one time you could see Israel, you could see Egypt, you could see Jordan, but
they're still excavating Petra. It's just it's one of the most incredible places in the world.
Well, I thought Pompeii was, because I went to Pompeii and Herculaneum, and I thought that was just.
All right, so now you whet my appetite for going there.
That was wonderful, and then again, South America, because I went to one of the trips. I went to Malta, and in Malta there was an underground place where they used to bury people, and I remember I had to make a reservation before I even went. And I went 2 days early to do that. So I'm there getting a bus because I'm by myself, and I'm getting a bus to go to this place for the underground. And I happened to stand talking to a guy who was from Malta but had done some research in Santa Monica.
Oh, my.
I mean, it's a small world.
Yeah.
It's really a small world. But I thought Malta was interesting, and from there I went to Sicily and then traveled around Sicily.
You've traveled so much.
I try to make, when I get to a place, to take in as much as I can, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have, and I found that it broadens you so much. But a lot of times, you know how people used to take a lot of photos? People come back, they don't want to hear about your trips or your photos unless they're travelers.
Yeah.
You walking.
Do you have any places you want to still? You're still traveling, right?
I want to. I think more or less I feel like now, instead of third world countries, I think I want to do something like a cruise, maybe. You know, when we were talking to Africa, my first trip was to South Africa and then into Zimbabwe.
Sure.
And then to take the little plane so you could go over the Victoria Falls. Yeah. And that little plane sounded like it had a lawnmower engine. I was terrified trying to take a picture.
And it's one of the wonders of the world. I haven't seen it. I had an opportunity once and I didn't take it, and I wish I would have.
Talking to you, I'm experiencing, God, I've been to a lot of places.
Yes, you have. Yeah.
Been a lot. New Zealand and Australia I haven't touched, but I had a buddy that used to fly for Air New Zealand, and there's a bar in Santa Monica called the King's Head, and everybody from England. Santa Monica had the largest group of people from England living there than anywhere else in the country. We're in that area.
Sure.
And so the crew from Air New Zealand used to come in, and I used to listen to them talk about New Zealand and Rotorua. I remember the guy said, well, we're flying to Oakland. I said, why would they have a Air New Zealand flight going to Oakland? He said, no, not O-A-K, A-U-C-K, Oakland.
I love it. That's great. So where do you want to go? Do you want to go to New Zealand and Australia?
No, I don't. They got more sheep than people.
How about Vietnam?
I've been to Vietnam.
Oh, see. You know, the more I mention, just...
I went to Vietnam because the guys, 58,000 Americans
too,
down
then.
there. I went to Cambodia, Laos. in Vietnam, I wanted to see where 58,000 American men died because that was my age bracket.
That's right.
And, maybe I could have had a wonderful second marriage, but they weren't available, you know.
Yeah.
Vietnam was interesting. When I landed and we had Saigon that night, I thought, was it this it? And then, of course, we traveled up to Hanoi, and I thought, we didn't really bomb Hanoi. It was still very French and, the circle for, and I kind of was looking at how some areas were fenced off because cluster bombs were still all over the place, and soldiers with missing limbs that were begging on the street, and I just found it was interesting that we then stopped and just left, and after losing so many people, I thought that was kind of tragic.
Yeah.
And still don't know. I don't think anybody should die when they can't spell the name of the place they're at.
That's interesting.
It was Indochine, then it became Vietnam, and where is it? I never heard of Vietnam.
Yeah. Anything we haven't talked about yet that you wanted to cover? I know you have some notes there.
I'm pretty. I'm on the diversity committee here at Westminster-Canterbury.
And what are you doing?
That. We're just starting up. We're getting direction and kind of putting up some ideas of what we want to do.
And tomorrow you have a program?
And tomorrow we have a program, the Juneteenth, the first celebration here. Jenny Spivey, who everybody knows, decided we ought to do that, and she checked with me, and I gave her the name of a speaker, and she has 2 speakers now coming in, and I think it's wonderful that she stepped up to say, I'm going to do the first Juneteenth here.
Yeah, in the chapel.
In the chapel.
11 o'clock. I'm going to try to come. I don't know if I'll be able to make it, but I'm going to try.
And I'm happy that I've been asked to be on the diversity committee, because I'd like to, participate in that.
Well, that's good. It'd be good for everyone. It's healthy for us to embrace all people and all holidays. Well, I want to thank you, and we appreciate your time and your story.
And I thank you for letting me share it.
All right. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Westminster-Canterbury Tales podcast. Thank you for listening.